And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever it is for you. For me, it is just past midnight on on Saturday, August the 10th. And so this is the news for Friday, August the 9th, 2024, day 899 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. The peeps are coming in. Hey, Anthony, Tommy, Tom. Hey, Paul. Hey, Big Hawk. Hey, Marius. How's everybody doing tonight? There's an awful lot going on, isn't there, boy? Hey, Darlene. Hey, David Frazier, Jessica. How's everybody doing? Hey, Joey the Lips. We got a bunch of stuff to talk about, boy. Hey, Chris Carter. Hey, Mad Mike. Super User, Rocco. Hey, Joe. So, guys, today is day 899 of this war. And there is an awful lot to talk about. This stunning surprise attack onto Russian territory is a startling example of the competence and thoughtfulness of the Ukrainian military and shines an absolute spotlight on the ineptitude and lack of preparedness that the Russians have. Look, the Russians have been doing this thing from the beginning, where all that they do is they just level everything in sight, because they haven't had to fight on their own territory. It's not their buildings they're knocking down. It's not their people whose homes they're destroying, right? They've had this scorched earth policy in Ukraine and it's their only strategy, and they cannot use it on their own territory. What the fuck are they going to do? Are they going to start leveling Russian cities to dislodge the new occupiers? It seems, we don't know. But it looks like they're going to have to do something like that. Now, Forbes is reporting that the Russian military command ignored warnings about the troop buildup and other warnings, believing that Ukraine would never enter Russia. And yet here we are. Now, when this thing started 4 days ago, it's just about 4 days, right? In about 8 hours, it'll be 96 hours. So we're in like hour 88 of this thing. And in the beginning, the reports were, oh, it's 300 men that went across the border. Oh, it's 500 men. Then the next day it was 1,000. Then it was 2 brigades. Now it appears that there are at least 4 Ukrainian brigades committed to this operation, with a 5th artillery brigade supporting the operation from inside of Ukraine, and as many as 5 additional brigades waiting in the wings to backfill and to replace the forward echelons. You're talking about 40,000 men potentially involved in this incursion. And that makes this the biggest counteroffensive that we've seen from the Ukrainians to date. And it's all happening. Size of a brigade, somewhere around 4,000. It varies depending on the group, anywhere from 2,000 to 6,000. But we're being told that on average for the Ukrainians, it's about 4,000. So that's about 40,000. Now, if that's true, right, because we don't know for sure, the whole Kursk offensive is subsumed in the fog of war. And there was a great quote from Ewan MacDonald, who is a journalist and commentator, war commentator, who said that not knowing the goals is a win for Ukraine. The fact that we don't know what they're doing is a win, because the Russians don't know either. And the Russians are having an awful hard time responding to this thing. An awful hard time. So a couple of things. There is this, we're getting this vision now of this scaled operation to push into Russia, and to push how far we don't know, because we don't know what the goals are, right? But the Kremlin has declared a federal state of emergency. So in 3 days' time, because Tuesday night, the Kremlin said that they had repulsed the invaders, right? That they had driven them back to Ukraine. That was Tuesday night. That changed by lunch on Wednesday. Boy, those messages had to be taken down off online. And now the Kremlin has finally declared a federal state of emergency. The Ukrainians, in just 4 days, I cannot stress this enough. In just 4 days, the Ukrainians have taken more Russian territory than the entire Russian army has managed to take in Ukraine in 400 days. Something like 350 square kilometers have been taken so far. The TikTok brigade, the Akhmat brigades, right? The Chechen barrier troops that have been in Ukraine were in this Belgorod region. And they have posted a video stating that Ukrainian forces are at least 10 kilometers deep. We know they're at least 35 today, as of today. That the Ukrainians had captured multiple settlements, and that the Akhmat brigades retreated in the face of overwhelming odds. Now, the Russian mill bloggers have really gone to town on this, claiming that the Akhmat brigades fled, that they simply ran away. And that would certainly track, given the history of the Akhmat brigades. Kyiv is sending in a second echelon of troops. They are mining the roads and bringing in air defense onto the territory of the Russian Federation. They're really bringing the war home to Russia, which in his comments today, listening to Zelensky, it seems that that is one of the primary missions here, to bring the war home to the Russians so that they know, the Russian people have a taste for what it's been like here in Ukraine for the last 2 years. And it is just a taste, and that's important, and we'll talk about that in a second here. There are reports now that the electronic warfare component of this was critical to the initial surprise and success. The Ukrainians have apparently developed methodologies for blocking the communications of the Russians while not blocking their own communications. That created a situation where elements on the ground could not talk to anybody else, could not coordinate their activities, could not coordinate movements or support. And that's a critical piece of the early success in this advance, it seems. Another reason that the Ukrainians are moving so fast is because they are bypassing some of the best defended and fortified positions. They're just leaving them behind and moving the front line to the front, with the intention, I would assume, of going back and clearing house later. But right now, they are bypassing multiple fortifications. Russia is evacuating towns that are 40 kilometers from the border. Now, if you're evacuating the town 40 kilometers from the border, you must think that the troops are on their way. And it appears that they are. As I said, we saw reconnaissance groups 35 miles into Russia. That was the description of the troops that were spotted, of the Ukrainians that were spotted 35 kilometers in. They were described as being small groups, likely of reconnaissance or reconnaissance in force advance troops, right? Letting the main body of troops know where everything is and what roads are open. The Ukrainians, for their part, destroyed a column of Russian armor, 15 military trucks. Now, these trucks were not all that was destroyed. There were some of those low vans and some other things, but there were 15 personnel trucks. Each one of those trucks was carrying as many as 35 Russian reservists. It's unclear whether they were fleeing from the front line or they were headed to the front line. But that's 535 men that could have been eliminated in this strike. If that's true, that would make this strike one of the top 5 Russian troop losses since the start of the war in one hit. Initial reports said that it was a drone attack on the convoy. We're getting reports now that it may have been a HIMARS strike. Rybar, this is a Russian outlet, as Kyiv is still pretty quiet on this thing. They're certainly not letting us know what their goals are or what the operational capacity is. Instead, they're keeping their mouths shut because plans love silence. Shh. So according to Rybar, the UAF have begun digging in. So they're building their own trenches, they're building their own networks of fortifications, and they are deploying a second echelon. So the first guys that came in, and did all the fighting, they're hanging back and building fortifications now, and fresh troops are moving up to do the fighting. Rybar also reported that Sudzha is lost. They reported that the town of, and that's how they put it, the town of Sudzha is lost, which means that it's in Ukrainian hands, of course. There are reports that there have been lots of shaping operations. Telecommunications and energy infrastructure has been struck in the Kursk Oblast, and electronic warfare has scrambled RU communications. Now, you guys know I love that podcast, Ukraine the Latest, and I can't encourage people enough to subscribe to that podcast over on YouTube. There's a guy on there named Dominic Nichols, who's his military career is storied. Let's say that. Now, he's looking at the geography. And if you look at the geography of where the Ukrainians are pushing, they're pushing in a space that sort of Ukraine wraps around Russia, right? And so if you drew a straight line across that space, you'd basically straighten out the border. And according to Dominic Nichols, he thinks that may be what they're up to. He says if they do that, then there's no attack of the flanks aren't exposed. You've just got a straight line with Ukraine on either end, and you've got no room for a flank attack. That would make an awful lot of sense. And that would certainly explain why this would be a choice location for this kind of an attack. Further, he goes on to say that if you straighten the border and you do it over open ground, that is amenable to maneuver warfare. And so the Ukrainians can get out there with their tanks and their APCs and they can do some damage. And Dominic Nichols thinks that's what may be going on. Russian jets are flying low to avoid air defense and to drop glide bombs. The number of glide bombs dropped in Donetsk has dropped significantly. Now think about it. You got a front line that is being pounded by these glide bombs that you can't do anything about because the United States won't let you use ATACMS and other long-range weapons to hit the airfields where the planes take off from. So what do? You start targeting the storage of the glide bombs. That's one thing you can do. And we saw 2 huge cook-offs of those storage depots this week. One at the Morozovsk Air Base down in Rostov-on-Don, and then another one just last night at the Lipetsk Air Base in Lipetsk, Kursk Oblast. According to Ukrainian sources, there were as many as 700 glide bombs stored at Lipetsk Air Base, and they have all been destroyed. In fact, they are still burning. The cook-off from that is still happening. Well, Dave, I think we're hoping that the F-16s are going to do something about the glide bombs, right? But in the meantime, it appears that what the Ukrainians have done is they've targeted the storage of those glide bombs, and this incursion into Russia means that the Russians have prioritized the bombing sorties over these troops, and now they're not hitting the front lines like they were. We're seeing a 10 to 20 fold decrease in the number of glide bombs along the rest of the front line. That's a huge relief for the frontline troops and is taking the pressure off of them. AIM 120s, baby. We've seen video. If you go through all the videos of Russian soldiers that have been captured, we're definitely talking about hundreds of Russian soldiers captured. There were even some Ukrainian guys on Telegram complaining about how much work it was taking all these Russian prisoners. Hysterical. Oh, hey, I see Sasha's here. Sasha's saying hello. I just want to say to Sasha, you're fucking funny. So in a comment today, Sasha was like, 2022, Russia is the second greatest army in the world. 2023, Russia is the second greatest army in Ukraine. 2024, Russia is the second greatest army in Russia. I thought that was fun. Hey, Jacob Grady, how you doing? Hey, Mike. Okay. The Africa Corps, formerly Wagner, right? But elements of the Africa Corps, or what used to be Wagner, were moved into Belgorod. Oh, gosh, I want to say about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, I first reported on it. And they are now being redeployed to Kursk. So it's Wagner forces or elements of the Africa Corps that are now headed into Kursk to deal with this incursion. Putin has gifted anybody who has to be relocated, anybody who's been dislocated by this incursion, you're getting a $114 one-time payment to help see you through. That's our Russia. In the Maui wildfires, people got $700 right off the bat, and that was just the initial, emergency payment. An advisor to Mr. Zelensky, or an advisor to President Zelensky, Mr. Polyachek, said this, meaning the incursion, will strengthen Kyiv's hand in future negotiations. Remember, Russia wants to freeze the front line. Well, are they going to want to freeze the front line now? Russia keeps talking to all of us about having to accept the new territorial realities. Is Russia going to accept the new territorial realities? I think not. He went on to say something to the effect of, when you make it cost them, it will change their view of the war. Medvedev, in a really stunning, lucid moment, Medvedev said that this is an attempt to distract forces from the front. Yeah, I think it is. That's at least one of the goals of this operation. Then he goes on to say, and this is rich, this is really hysterical to me. He goes on to say, now the special military operation should acquire an extraterritorial character, and we will stop only when it is profitable for us to do so. So, as always, Medvedev is doubling down, double shots doubling down, and is saying what exactly? That now they should take all of Ukraine, as if that hasn't been their failed objective from the beginning. Hey, Samso, how you doing, pal? Hey, Weebo. Hey, Richard Prexis. Now, the theories. Let's review the theories of why the Ukrainians are doing this. And there are lots of them. There is the Suja gas distribution and metering station. 50% of Russia's sales of natural gas to Europe go through that line. It's the financial lifeblood of the Kremlin. It's important to note that Gazprom reports that gas is still flowing through that line. However, it's also worth noting that the contracts under which that gas flows through that line expire at the end of this year. So if Ukraine is moving in and taking control of that station, and they plan to be there at the end of the year, they could shut it right off. Possible. The Russians, of course, are talking about the Kursk nuclear power plant. The Russians are all convinced that this is nuclear blackmail against Russia. That's because Russia does nuclear blackmail, right? The Ukrainians aren't going to do nuclear blackmail. But they could have other reasons for taking this Kursk nuclear power plant. Maybe to trade for Zaporizhia. Maybe to shut it down and kill the industry in the area. Because there's a lot of heavy industry there. 50%, 48% of the iron ore that comes out of Russia comes out of this region. It's powered by the industry that extracts it, is powered by that nuclear power plant. 9.6% of all food meat production in the country comes out of this region. It's all powered by that nuclear power plant. Turning that power plant off would be an economic disaster for Russia. Accusation is confession. Dude, isn't it amazing? It really so often is. At least in the case of unfounded accusations. Ukraine, another reason they might be doing this is to bring the war home to Russia, which we've mentioned. Leverage in the negotiations, which we mentioned. Land and POWs to trade. To cut the ground lines of communication to Luhansk, because the rail lines are right there, and the rail lines and the road lines are now in the hands of the Ukrainians. They moved right on them. Draw Russian reserves out, which we know is happening. Troops are being relocated from Kherson, and the Africa Corps folks in Belgorod are on their way. I suggested that they might be practicing maneuver warfare, that it might be a real live simulation or a real live attempt at the complex maneuver warfare that they haven't really had a chance to execute on. I learned today that we don't call it practicing, we call it a limited mission rehearsal. So this could be a limited mission rehearsal for maneuver warfare. Give the guys a chance to do it. And then, of course, there's the morale boost that all of this brings to Ukraine, to Ukrainian supporters, gets Ukraine in the news again, and gets us all excited that Ukraine is making the breakthroughs in spite of the fact that we continue to tie their hands behind their backs, that they need to make to win. And then there's my theory. D, all of the above. Every single one of those mission objectives are reasonable, smart, and in line with the goal of defeating the enemy. There is no reason it can't be all of them. This is a target-rich environment, and the Ukrainians can do some damage. Hit them where it hurts. Trash Hunter makes the point that there are many Ukrainian people in Kursk, and that's a great point to make. Kursk is a good oblast maybe to enter because there's so many Ukrainian-speaking Russians. And that means you might have friends or partisans inside the oblast, and it certainly appears that they do, based on those military trucks that were blown up on the first day of the incursion, but they were 25 kilometers from the border. So that it was too early. It seems unlikely that any Ukrainian forces could have penetrated that deeply into Russian territory in those first 12 hours. So it's likely, I think, that the Ukrainians do have friends in Kursk. Whether or not they have enough is yet to be determined. According to the Russian MOD, last night they intercepted 75 Ukrainian drones over 6 oblasts and Crimea, as well as 7 naval drones in the Black Sea. Here in Ukraine, air defense shot down 27 out of 27 Shahed's drones incoming. The last comment that I would make on the incursion into Russia is the big difference. What's the big difference? When you look at the video footage of the Russian incursion into Ukraine and compare it to the video footage of the Ukrainian incursion into Russia, what's the big difference that you see right away? The towns aren't destroyed. Everything's not destroyed. The Ukrainians are focused on military targets. They're not leveling towns and villages. And that speaks to me of a dramatic difference between the way that these two armies are prosecuting this war. And it does occur to me that the Russians don't have another strategy. What they learned in Syria to level everything is not going to work on their own territory. And it's not going to work to break the will of the Ukrainians. And they seem to be a completely one-trick pony. They don't have another plan. I saw a comment scroll by here that somebody had heard that the square mileage taken or square kilometers taken was up to 700 kilometers. Now, I don't know that to be true, but since I made that earlier video and I did my notes for tonight where it was 350, I have since heard new estimates of 450. Kibbles and Bits posted that. Kibbles and Bits is saying that it's actually 600 square kilometers. And it could be, Kibbles and Bits, depending on how you count that, because given the way that they're passing by some of the stronger fortifications, I think that it's likely that you can't claim maximalist control over the entire area. There are going to be pockets of resistance in there that are going to have to be dealt with. But there's no doubt that the Ukrainians are running across Kursk like it's an Iraqi thunder run. It's really something. It's really, really something. In other news, the Russians bombed a supermarket and post office in Konstantinivka today. There are 14 unalived and 50 in the hospital over this. A supermarket. The Russians they continue to advance on Pokrovsk. 2 days ago, they were 20 kilometers away. Today, they're 16. And evacuations in Pokrovsk continue reluctantly, I would argue. Okay, that's about it for me. That's all the top line stuff from today. News for Friday, August the 9th, 2024. Day 899 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. And I want to thank Fitz again. Fitz, I just gave you the rest of this week as live sponsor. And so tonight we want to say thank you to Fitz if you see him around, if he's still here. And I want to thank the best moderator team on the Tickety Talk. Cheyenne, Vanetta, PT, John Williams, Jay, and Travis. I want to thank Lars, who has the Peter's Peeps group over on the Book of Faces, Peter's Peeps Public, PPP, say that 3 times real fast. And Vanetta, who has the Dismantle Project 2025 page, as well as the Google Docs share, where you can get letters to Congress, the Senate, and the White House requesting a no-fly zone over Western Ukraine. All right, so now we'll go to Q&A, questions, comments, points of observation, or personal need. Anything from anybody about anything? Thank you, Alex. Let's hang out. We're hanging out, cool. We're just hanging out, chilling. It's Friday. Hey, Wanpa. Hey, Wanpa, I invited you to a thing on Sunday. Check your Facebook. Good evening. Hey, Dive Hard. I love those little lights. I got to tell you, I do love those little lights. There's something wonderfully ethereal about them. How many Ukrainian troops are in Kursk? Bobby, we don't know. Thank you, John. We don't really know. There could be as many as 40,000 troops supporting this incursion. Now, when we say that, that doesn't mean that there's 40,000 that went into Kursk. But it could be 16,000. It could be 16,000. Pete heard some areas that Russian citizens are looking at Ukraine soldiers as liberators. Those are, I think, that's possible. I don't have any evidence of that yet, Fitz. There's some apocryphal stories about it. But it seems to me that that's going to be a very limited percentage of the population. That's going to be the Ukrainian-speaking Russians. So these are, right, because that part of the world used to be Ukraine, actually. And so there's some folks there that have been there for generations and generations speaking Ukrainian, even though they're Russian citizens, you know. So it's hard to say how many Ukrainian troops are actually in Russia. Yeah, you can ignore Tiger Time Bandit. That's not a question that is reflective of reality in any way. Russell Kennedy says, did you hear that Ukraine is going to hold a referendum to annex Kursk? No, they're not. No, they're not. But they're certainly having fun talking about it. They're having a great deal of fun talking about it. I forget who it was. It was a high-ranking member of Zelensky's staff who said basically today that Kursk, Belgorod, Bryansk, and a couple other oblasts will all be holding referendums to exit Russia or stay as part of Russia. I don't think that that's a real thing. I mean, the international community looks at Russia's referendums in Ukraine as illegal. And I think that Ukraine understands that you don't do that in an occupier situation. So I think that they're having fun with it, Russell. It's like Samso published this great video, which I did not understand until I understood it. And then it was funny as shit. But I thought he was making a serious point at first. I did enjoy that, Samso, once I understood what was going on. Why is this person still here? Yeah, dude, I loved it. Loved it. Funny shit. Ukrainians just retell RU propaganda in the context of this invasion. It's funny as hell. Exactly, Sasha. It's satire. It's parody display, right? Love it. I love it, you know. And it does go to the point that Russian hypocrisy has to be brought home to the Russians. They have to see it themselves. The dominoes are lined up and are ready to fall. I hope so. Rob Walker says, I'd like to think Putin is dreading waking up in the morning to listen to his morning update. Me too, Rob Walker. It would be a shame if this caused so much stress he had a stroke or something. That would be terrible. You said 10% of food and most of iron from area that power plant covers. Correct, Pedro. Not 10% of all food in the country, just 10% of meat. So pork, chicken, beef. 20, almost 20%, 19.7 if I remember right. 20% of the sugar produced in Russia comes from this area. And all of that agriculture, the water for irrigation, the processors to process the beets into sugar, that all 20% of the domestic sugar is produced there. And Russia's got a ban on sugar exports right now because they're barely producing enough to meet their own needs. Now, Dave Hayes, if you guys don't know Dr. Dave Hayes, you should follow him. He's a PhD who actually knows something about warfare and being in the army and stuff. And he says, keep an eye out for movement around Kyiv on E38. That would be the start of a double envelopment. Now, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but a double envelopment is basically a pincer move, right? You come at the enemy from two directions at the same time and cut them off. Is that correct? Hey, Hobo. Hey, Flippy. Looking forward to dinner tomorrow, pal. My idea is that Ukraine wants to take as much as they can to trade land for Ukrainian land. Possibly, Flippy. I think that's that may be one of the goals, but we'll see. Are they actually in Russia, or is it just the area Russia took in 2014? CB Long, that is a great question to ask. No, this is not occupied territory. This is Russia. It's a great question. How many kilometers Ukraine inside of Russia? Gene, they're at least, forward reconnaissance units are at least 35 kilometers. What is that, about 26 miles or 27 miles inside of Russia? While the main force is probably at least 15, somewhere between 10 and 15. The movement will turn right to attack the orcs from back in the Luhansk Oblast. That doesn't seem likely, Wind 63. And it doesn't seem likely because that's a long way to go. That is a long road to hoe. You got to fight your way from Kursk through Belgorod to get there. It will be lovely to see the Russian Legion opening a new front soon. Interesting, Snow. Maybe that's why we haven't seen the Freedom of Russia brigades, because they're about to come in somewhere else, maybe as part of Dave Hayes' double envelopment. I need a map. I need a map. You're not wrong. Pedro, I don't know what the Modi tactic is. I don't know what that is. To show people Russia is weak, Putin is weak. Yep, I think that's part of it. The good part about Russia's being displaced is they can tell people what's actually going on. Exactly, Fitz. Because the Russian people don't know. Right? They've got no access to Instagram, no access to TikTok, no access now to YouTube. Russian disinformation from a state-controlled media is all that they have. Ukraine would probably rather have the Kursk region than the pro-Putin region in the east. Roy, it's a myth that there is a pro-Putin region in the east. That's a myth. I've talked to dozens, if not hundreds at this point, actually. But I've talked to at least dozens of refugees from the East, Russian-speaking Ukrainians, who have told me that there was never any popular movement in favor of Russia, that was a lie told by the little green men, those Russian regular armies folks that came into Ukraine out of uniform. Yeah, Putin doesn't really have any logic, right? But Bobby makes the joke that, well, by Putin logic, the Ukrainian parts of Russia should be Ukrainian because the Russian-speaking parts of Ukraine are Russian, right? Is Kursk Ukrainian speaking? Not entirely, but there is a chunk of the population there that is, which is why you might see some videos of locals welcoming the Ukrainians. Is that $114 tax-free? It is not, Dark Irish. They will have to pay taxes on that. Hey, somebody named Joe just joined the Patreon. Thank you, Joe. Dave Hayes says that on the map there is movement towards Koronivo that could be a part of border straightening. And Dave, if I'm not mistaken, I thought they already took that. I thought that was now in the scope of influence. But I may be mistaken. It's hard with the names, man, right? Is Russia now Night and Shade is saying that Russia is now blocking Signal and WhatsApp as well. Huh. Interesting. I had not heard that. I don't know about that. Telegram still gets through, right? Yes, of course it does, because it's Kremlingram. Please, nothing happens on Telegram that the FSB doesn't want to have happen. I was banned from Telegram. Right now, it's very hard to get banned from Telegram. And I don't know what I did to get banned from Telegram. I swear to God, not one revenge porn or beheading video ever put on Telegram, but I got banned from Telegram, yes. They might be forcing Putin into a general mobilization, right? Maybe he gets nervous, panics, calls for a general mobilization, and that's the end of his political career. Eli asks, did I hear that UA hacked airways and are broadcasting Ukrainian soldiers raising UA flags? I'm unaware of that, Eli. Now, there was a situation with a Ukrainian flag in, shoot. That was somewhere in Donetsk. As the I want to say maybe New York or Toretsk, where the Russians had moved in and taken a school, and so they raised the flag over the school, and the Ukrainians blew it up and raised a Ukrainian flag over the school. How much disinformation do you think they have in Putin's briefings to protect themselves? Well, Big D, if you watched the National Security Council meeting where they updated Putin on what was happening, it was a lot of bullshit, boy. It was a lot of bullshit. Thanks, Joe. There's Joe S71. Everybody thank Joe. Pitching in, making this all possible for me. Also saw that UA had hacked people's like doorbell cams and security cameras. I don't know anything about that. Is JWS here? Is Jason Willis Star in here? Jay, did you hear anything about the Ukrainians hacking people's home security cameras and doorbell cams and stuff? Huge pressure on Putin. Be like Joe. Thanks, PT. Are Russian civilians in the invaded area now escaping to Ukraine? I don't think we've seen any of that, Oscar. I doubt very much that there's a path for them to do that easily. Okay, guys, we have just about 8 minutes left. And I do want to thank again the moderator team, who is the best moderator team on the Tickety Talk. Cheyenne, Vanetta, PT, John Williams, Jay, and Travis. Big thank you to Joe, who just joined the Patreon. Fitz, who is the sponsor of tonight's live. Always appreciate you, Fitz. Big thanks to Nightshade, who has the Peters Peeps Public. Peters Peeps Public. That's the name of the group on Book of Faces. Join us there, please. And Vanetta, who has the Dismantle Project 2025 group on the Book of Faces. All right. And of course, big thanks to all the Patreon supporters, especially our newest member, Joe. Thank you, Joe, for joining the Patreon. I've seen videos of cameras in Russia hacked, and they were playing Ukrainian music. They have hacked security cameras before, so it wouldn't be much of a surprise if it's happening now. Russell, I couldn't do it without you guys, so I really always appreciate you guys. Thank you. Oh, I remember those days when my Tickety Talk still worked. Good night, Tatanka. Thanks for all the gifts, guys. Thanks for all the likes. Thanks for liking the live. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for the interaction. Look for a map video on this. Dave, what am I looking for a map video on? Exactly. Who will Putin blame for the cursed disaster? Anybody and everybody. Thank you, Marilyn. You too. You too, Van. Thanks for stopping by. Yeah, right? It's a huge... Oh, thanks, Dave. I'll take a look. It is a huge intelligence failure. And the Kremlin had warnings, and they ignored them. Convinced in their arrogance that no one would dare cross the border and invade Mother Russia. Well, that idea is out the window. Right out the window. Sasha says, at least we know Gerasimov is still alive. It does appear that way. I mean, for months I thought he wasn't. He must have been badly hurt last October. So there is an audacity to this. Nightshade says there, he who dares wins. And it's a great line, right? Fortune favors the bold. And this is an audacious moment in this war. Huge amounts of resources, planning, equipment, men, and their lives have gone into this operation. And already it's having real impact on the front line and on the war. So, as I said, day one of this thing, we may not know what's going on. But by this point, we should be willing to trust our Ukrainian allies because it's their existence they're fighting for. It's their lives on the line. They're the ones that are bleeding and dying every day for their own freedom, for the freedom of their children, their families, and their futures. And so sitting here second guessing them is fucking stupid and self-indulgent. Grow up and support our allies. And if they fail, let's be there to support them when they fail. And if they win, let's be there to share that champagne. Keep it a secret. Damn right, Fitz, right? Plans love silence. Keep it a secret. Yeah, who's Russia going to ask for help? Iran and North Korea. That's who they're going to ask for help. We are living through history. There is no doubt about it, Nightshade. There is no, right? I mean, that's one of the reasons I came to Ukraine, because I believe that this is a defining moment in history. And I hate to be left out of a good party, boy. I just hate to be left out of a good party. There is no other option for Ukraine but to win. I agree, Sasha. I could not agree more. Bobby, as I understand it, and I don't know if Dr. Hayes is still here, but if he is, I would pass this to him. But as I understand maneuver warfare, the combined arms movement of men, machines, and their weapons across a field of battle, this is the closest we've seen to real maneuver warfare since the start of this war. And Dave says, yep, okay. Well, it's nice when I get things right, Dave. History is in the making, Sammy. You couldn't be more right. Hitting the where they aren't. Simon, it seems highly unlikely that Ukraine is going to go to Moscow. They're 350 miles, not kilometers, miles from Moscow now. That's a long haul. This is a wake-up call to the U.S. if they don't allow long-range U.S. tools in Russian Federation. Let's hope so. Let's hope so. Good night, Pedro. Ukraine is sassy, Die Harv, aren't they? They are sassy, boy. Hitting the enemy where they are not. Ah, okay. Okay, so that makes sense. So this was a weak spot on the border, a porous spot where the Ukrainians felt they could push through quickly and then keep going, and that seems to be exactly what they've done. How does this appear? Yeah, I love it that Russia's crying that this is unfair too. I mean, it's just hysterical. How does this compare to Kyiv offensive in 2022? So, Bobby, if I remember right, in September of 2022, under the command of General Syrsky, the Ukrainian armed forces, mostly a couple of tank divisions, rolled into the Kharkiv Oblast and liberated much of it inside of like 10 days. And those runs were commonly described as thunder runs, which was a term that got coined during the Iraq War, if I'm not mistaken, where lots of tanks go in and just kind of like bypass a lot of the fortifications, but get to the critical strategic and tactical goals to liberate the region. This is, I think, different. This is very different, but I don't know enough about it to say how. Dave Hayes is telling me that the term actually goes back to Vietnam. Thank you, Dave. Hey, Croatia. Hey, Kijo. I mean, I can't believe that Putin is still clinging to power, that somebody hasn't taken him out. It's crazy. Okay, so guys, it is the top of the hour. I want to thank everybody for hanging out. Thanks to all the moderators. Thanks to Fitz, our sponsor. Hey, Ballerina, how you doing, pal? Most importantly, thanks to all of you who tune in every night and have this conversation with me. I'm deeply appreciative of the opportunity. I'm going to bed, Dave. Well, I got half an episode of I'm going through Game of Thrones again. I got half an episode I'm going to watch before I call it a night. But that's it for me. So, ladies and gentlemen and other non-binary folks, I want to thank everybody so much for tuning in tonight. And we will see you all tomorrow. Take care.